Capitol. Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger is with me now. She is also a former CIA officer who worked counterterrorism cases. So, Congresswoman Spanberger, great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I just want to dive right in on the message we heard. You know, you were sitting there. The message from the president's speech is all about unity, right? And when I think about unity, I'm also then thinking of the people who stormed the Capitol with Confederate flags and wearing Camp Auschwitz sweatshirts and carrying, having nooses. Like, do they look like they're looking to unify? I mean, how is unity supposed to work is my question, Congresswoman.
Well, I think in American society, there's always been challenges. There's always been those who are outside the norms of the societal norms of our community of law and order. So I think that for those who would break the law, for those who would rise up in insurrection and attack the United States Capitol, I don't think that President Biden's message was intended for them. I think President Biden's message was intended for Americans across the country who may have preferred a different outcome, but weren't going to rise up in an armed or violent insurrection to try and undo an election. I think President Biden was speaking to people throughout my district in Central Virginia who are just tired of the fighting and the division and families not being able to get together for holidays because of what has occurred in this country over the past 4 years. And I think it's important to note that even when advocating for unity, I didn't hear word one of the president talking about not pursuing accountability, not talking about the reality of what occurred on January 6th, and frankly, the rise of white nationalism, which he mentioned in his speech, the threat of domestic violent extremists.
I want to talk to you about that because I know that that is one of your primary concerns, right, is how the insurrection really galvanizes these extremists, these domestic terrorists. How should the government, how should Homeland Security respond to this? How can they prevent future threats?
Well, I think it's important for everyone, your viewers, those who are doing the day-to-day work of preventing attacks, to recognize that what occurred on January 6th was not an isolated event. While it might have been an isolated event in that it was a violent attack on the United States Capitol, a one-time occurrence, the underpinnings of what happened there, the move towards the growth and the recruitment abilities that exist for these domestic violent extremist groups, this has been ongoing. Their growth, their networks have expanded. And so across our country, we need to recognize that this is a real threat. This was not a one-off. This was not a one-time thing unless we aggressively work to make it so. And it starts with ideology. It starts with us accepting half-truths. It starts with us not speaking up when we hear something we know is wrong. It starts with, those in political office who might politically benefit from allowing people to think that a conspiracy theory is correct. And that, like frogs in water, you start to feel unmoored and you lose a sense of what is real and what is not. And that creates fertile ground for the domestic violent extremist groups that would be recruiting across this country. And, we've seen a growth in that threat, and we need to be wide-eyed and clear-eyed about the threat that it poses and our aggressive efforts to stop it.
To that point, I was reading a piece this morning in the New York Times. They went to Charlottesville, your backyard there in Virginia, to talk to Heather Heyer's mother. Heather, was killed when those nasty sympathizers stormed the city a couple of years ago. And so the Capitol attack and then Trump's response to it was frighteningly similar. And Heather's mother told the Times, this is the direct quote, "Look at the lessons learned from Charlottesville. The rush to hug each other and sing Kumbaya is not an effective strategy." So, Congresswoman Spanberger, did we learn any lessons from Charlottesville if this is still where we are now?
So in the aftermath of Charlottesville, we were quick, I think, as a community to think it was a one-time event, right? We had never seen anything like that. When Heather Heyer, and my sympathies go to her family, when Heather Heyer, a woman who was standing up for what she believed in, for what was right, marching for peace, marching for justice, when she was murdered by a far-right extremist, by a white nationalist, in many ways we viewed it as this was an isolated event. But it wasn't an isolated event. They don't all look the same, right? We saw attack after attack on Jewish cemeteries, on synagogues. We saw the murder of congregants at the Tree of Life. These are all somewhat different occurrences of violence, but they are all rooted in the same domestic far-right white nationalist threat. And so I think that the quote that you mentioned from Heather Heyer's mother is an important one. While we can try and find unity, we should be unified in our aggressive denouncement of white nationalism, far-right extremism, and we should be very clear that even when it isn't resulting in violence in the streets, as we saw in Charlottesville, as we saw in the Capitol, that if we are even allowing for that ideology to permeate our society, to be excused in the way we heard the former president say there were good people on both sides, we are allowing it to seep in and take root. And those roots are what give it life. And so we might see it sprout up in different places, but that root system is what we all need to be unified in fighting.
We're looking to you to help lead the fight in eradicating all of those roots. Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much.